The four abdominal muscles expand far beyond the stomach region. In fact, they form a muscular girdle that reaches around the sides of the thorax all the way to the thoracolumbar aponeurosis, and superiorly to the middle ribs, and inferiorly to the inguinal ligament. The revered washboard belly is formed by the multiple superficial bellies of the rectus abdominis. Lateral to the rectus abdominis is the external oblique. Unlike the round bellies of the rectus, the external oblique is a broad superficial muscle best palpated at its attachment to the lower ribs. The thin internal oblique fibers are deep and perpendicular to the external oblique fibers and can be difficult to distinguish. And lastly, the transverse abdominis, the deepest muscle of the group, plays a major role in forced exhalation and cannot be specifically palpated.
So let's begin with the rectus abdominis, better known as the six-pack muscle, but in all reality, it's a 10-pack. So what I'm going to ask my partner to do is, just so we can see the muscle engaged, is go ahead and do a little bit of a crunch. So he's going to just flex his torso a little bit, and there we have a great example of the topography of that rectus abdominis here. And while he's just engaged, I'm just going to set my fingers here and really isolate those individual bellies that extend all the way from the rib cage down to that pubic crest. Great, go ahead and relax. So let's just take this to the next step and just isolate some of the landmarks that help really shape where the rectus abdominis is. The first I'm going to find is just that edge of the ribs right here. So above that is going to be this surface of the rib cage, surface of ribs 5, 6, and 7. And there's his xiphoid process just at the bottom of the sternum. So on one end of the rectus, we've got this surface of the bottom portion of the rib cage, and down here we've got the pubic crest. Now, let's just stop here for a second. Chances are you've never palpated your own pubic crest, let alone your partner's, so let's all find it. You, me, and my partner. So first thing we're going to do is just go ahead and locate your navel or your umbilicus right here. And then just progressively work your fingers down inferiorly, and you'll feel flesh and flesh of the belly. And then there, about 6 or 8 inches down, just above the pubic hairline, you'll feel a ridge of bone. And that's your pubic crest. Okay? So now I'm going to try to find it on my partner. Can I locate your pubic crest? Sure. Okay. So ask permission. So there's his umbilicus, and there we just sort of press into the fibers of the rectus, and right about there, there's the ridge of his pubic crest. If you do a little crunch again, great. And there I can really feel the tendon of the rectus abdominis attached right there. Good. Go ahead and relax. And it gives you an idea of how the rectus abdominis sort of tapers as it comes down the abdomen like so. So now that the belly's relaxed, I'm just going to sort of work my fingers into this belly here. And you can even take both sides and gently grasp them and sort of lift them up a little bit. Great. And here is that lateral edge of the rectus, which is where I can feel the rectus abdominis, and on the other side is the external oblique. So speaking of which, let's see if we can find that. So the external oblique is that broad sheet of muscle here on the side of the torso. And we sometimes think that it's like just here. But no, if you really look at it for a moment, and there we can see it, it spans all the way from this edge of the rectus around the side of the torso and all the way back here to the thoracolumbar aponeurosis. And of course, deep to the external oblique is the internal oblique, which there we can see that running in perpendicular direction to the externals. And then, of course, deep to those two are the transverse abdominis fibers. So we've got 3 broad sheets of muscle that really coat and cover this entire side of the abdomen. So if I want to see the external oblique contract, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask my partner to just bring this shoulder toward this hip. Great. So he does a crunch and he kind of rotates, shortening these fibers right here, which are the external obliques. And all of this surface here, you can see where it interdigitates with the serratus anterior right there. And all of those fibers you can really see come all the way down to that iliac crest to here at the edge of the rectus. Good. And relax. Deep to that, we have the internal obliques running again perpendicularly. And so to engage this side of the internal obliques, I'm going to have him bring this shoulder toward this hip. And so all of these fibers shorten and deep to the external obliques, which still contract a little bit for this motion, but deep to those, right in here, we can feel those internal oblique fibers right there. Great, and relax. And then finally, of course, we've got the transverse abdominis deep to those, which is pretty much unpalpable, but if you're grasping some of this tissue on the side of the thorax right here, in between the bottom of the ribs and the iliac crest, you know that you're accessing the transverse abdominis as well. Good. Okay, reality check. Chances are that your partner's not going to have ripped abs like my previous partner. Most people don't. I certainly don't. And the question arises, when the abdomen doesn't give you any visual clues because it's covered with a layer of adipose tissue, how do you locate the abdominal muscles? Well, I'll give you a hint. A little help from your bony landmarks. So let's give it a try. The bony landmarks that really get me in line with the rectus abdominis. Do you remember what they were? That's right. First, I'm going to just find that bottom edge of the rib cage right here. That's not where the rectus attaches, but it's a really good place to start. And I can follow it right up to the xiphoid process. And if I walk laterally a little bit, there's that surface of those 5th, 6th, and 7th ribs right there. Good. So the muscle comes down the front of the abdomen here somewhere and attaches at that pubic crest. So can I palpate your pubic crest?
Yes.
Great. So there's his navel, and I'm just going to work through some of this tissue here, all the way down, and there is that pubic crest. Great. Now, if you go ahead and do a little crunch, great. And just hold it there for a second. Now, we can't see any of those ripped bellies of the rectus abdominis, but if I set my fingers right on this tissue and work through some of the adipose, there I can definitely feel some of those bellies of the rectus. And here, if I come over to the side, I can really sense the edge of that muscle. Good. Go ahead and relax. Good. So even though I couldn't see any of the rectus abdominis like I saw before, I know just by using bony landmarks and a sense of where that muscle is and visualizing it, that's where my rectus is going to be. And then if I come over here to the side, I again can find that bottom edge of the rib cage, knowing that those obliques are going to cover this portion of the ribs here, all of this space between the ribs and that iliac crest. Let me see if I can find that. There's that iliac crest coming around the side of the torso here. And then if I ask my partner, go ahead and try to bring this shoulder toward this hip, great. And all of this tissue, yes, deep to the adipose tissue is definitely engaged. A very nice solid wall of muscle. Good, and relax. And then when he relaxes, I can work my fingers in and deep to this adipose and feel those obliques. So the lesson here is that you don't need to have ripped abs in order to locate the abdominals. You can do it even through adipose tissue and clothing and whatnot.